Just for a moment of fun, the rich man turned the waitress into the main character and tried to humiliate her. But when everyone thought she had given up, that was when her instincts rose, a talent that overshadowed everyone in this room. The warm glow of candlelight flickered across the pristine white tablecloths of Bourbon Steak, the most prestigious fine dining restaurant in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a Saturday evening, and the air buzzed with the soft clinking of crystal glasses, the rhythmic footsteps of servers in polished shoes, and the velvety smoothness of jazz melodies drifting from the corner of the room. The restaurant exuded an air of exclusivity, a place where the elite gathered to sip vintage wine and discuss business deals worth millions. Among the diligent servers weaving gracefully between tables was Serena. At just 19, she moved with quiet efficiency, her dark curls neatly tucked into a bun, her posture poised and her uniform impeccable. Though she rarely spoke beyond what was necessary, her large, expressive eyes carried a depth that hinted at something beyond the role she played here. Her true passion was not in serving tables, but in music. Since childhood, the violin had been her sanctuary, a place where she could express every joy, every sorrow, and every unspoken thought. But dreams did not pay the bills, and working long shifts at Bourbon Steak was a necessity, a stepping stone toward the music school she longed to attend, Juilliard. Few people knew of her talent, except for a handful of restaurant staff who would catch her in her lonely moments, plucking notes from the old violin she carried with her, not the one kept in the restaurant's glass case, a Stradivarius worth over $10 million. An unattainable treasure she could only admire from afar. Just knowing it was there gave her hope, a reminder that her dream, though far-fetched, was not impossible. Every evening, as she attended to the city's wealthiest patrons, Serena harbored a secret longing. It wasn't their tips, it was the desire to pluck the violin in the glass case. Before that, she spent years teaching herself, her only mentors the dim light of YouTube tutorials and the lilting tunes of street musicians playing for spare change. Tonight, however, was different. The atmosphere shifted as the door swung open, and a man entered, commanding attention without uttering a word. Robert Gonzalez. The billionaire heir strode in with an air of arrogance, his presence sending a ripple of tension through the staff. At 55, Robert was a man who had inherited everything: money, power, and an unshakable sense of superiority. His name alone was enough to strike fear into the hearts of those who had the misfortune of serving him. He was known for his extravagance, his unpredictable whims, and his sharp tongue that cut deeper than any blade. As he settled into his usual table, a group of associates flanked him, eager to bask in his wealth and influence. Laughter erupted at his crude jokes, and orders for the finest whiskey were placed without hesitation. Serena, assigned to his table, approached with the same grace she always carried, her face composed, though she could feel his eyes on her. Not stopping there, Robert leaned back in his chair, lazily swirling his glass of scotch before glancing at her name tag. Serena, he mused, his voice dripping with amusement. That sounds like the name of someone with a hidden talent. Tell me, Serena, do you have any tricks up your sleeve? She hesitated for the briefest moment, before offering a polite smile. I'm just here to serve, sir. Can I get you anything else? His smirk widened. Oh, but I insist. Surely a girl like you must have some entertainment value. Something in his tone made her stomach tighten. She had encountered condescension before, but tonight felt different. There was a challenge in his gaze, a cruel amusement that sent a shiver down her spine. The air around the table grew tense as his companions exchanged knowing glances, sensing that Robert was setting the stage for one of his infamous games. And just like that, Serena knew, tonight, she was his chosen target. That made her pulse quicken as she set a glass down, careful not to let her hands shake. She'd grown up facing hardships, learning to mask fear with composure. But as Robert continued to watch her with that calculating gleam in his eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that her night was about to take an unexpected turn. What did he want from her? And more importantly, could she withstand whatever he was about to throw her way? Before we continue the story, comment below where you are watching today, and if you like stories like this, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss any new stories. Robert leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips as he observed Serena in silence. His sharp, calculating gaze followed her every movement, and from time to time he exchanged knowing glances with his companions. It was clear he had something in mind. Serena continued her work, keeping her focus on serving the guests and avoiding Robert's piercing stare. Yet an uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. She had encountered difficult customers before, but something about Robert made her skin prickle. This wasn't just another wealthy patron with an inflated ego. This man was looking for amusement at someone else's expense. With a theatrical wave of his hand, Robert launched into a monologue, bragging about his many accomplishments, his wealth, and his sharp business acumen. He spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear, his voice cutting through the gentle hum of conversation and the soothing jazz music in the background. He ridiculed those who, as he put it, lacked ambition, dismissing them as people who would never amount to anything. Several patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, visibly annoyed by the disruption, but Robert's entourage chuckled and nodded along, enabling his arrogance. Serena, determined to ignore him, carried on with her duties, but then, just as she set down a tray of drinks, Robert's voice cut through the air again, this time directed straight at her. "Tell me, Serena," he mused, his voice coated with feigned curiosity. "Surely a young woman like you has some kind of dream beyond carrying plates and pouring drinks." She hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden attention. "I play the violin," she carefully admitted in a voice so low that the man in front of her wouldn't hear if he wasn't concentrating, hoping that would be the end of it. Robert's eyes gleamed with intrigue. "Ah, a musician. How delightful. Why don't you play something for us? Let's see if you've got any real talent." A cold knot of dread tightened in Serena's chest. "I appreciate the offer, sir, but I'm here to work." Robert waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. A little performance won't hurt. Come now, don't be shy." His voice grew louder, drawing the attention of more guests. Conversations tapered off as more heads turned in Serena's direction, the weight of their stares pressed down on her. She glanced toward her colleagues, hoping for an intervention, but they remained silent, unwilling to cross a man as powerful as Robert Gonzalez. "What's wrong?" Robert taunted, his smirk widening. "Don't tell me you're all talk and no talent." His words stung. Serena felt a flush of humiliation creep up her neck. This wasn't just about music anymore. It was about proving herself. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of the values he had instilled in her since childhood. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Serena. You are worth more than they'll ever know." Her gaze flickered towards the Stradivarius violin in its case, the instrument that symbolized her dreams. She stood frozen, caught in the battle between pride and fear. Robert watched her, his expression triumphant, waiting for her to crumble. Instead, she lifted her chin, her voice steady, despite the turmoil raging inside her. "I will play." Serena stood still, her fingers clenched so tightly her palms began to bleed, and her heart pounded in her chest. The entire restaurant fell eerily silent, their eyes like hundreds of surveillance cameras fixed on her as she walked slowly, cautiously, toward the gleaming glass case that held the priceless Stradivarius violin. The air was thick with anticipation, a charged energy hanging between her and the watchful patrons. This was it. There was no turning back now. Each step felt heavier than the last. It was as if an invisible force was trying to hold her back, whispering doubts into her ear. But she couldn't afford hesitation, not when all eyes were on her, not when Robert Gonzalez lounged in his chair, smirking, confident that he had backed her into a corner. To him, this was a game, a spectacle for his amusement. To her, it was everything. As she reached the case, the golden glow of the chandeliers illuminated her face, highlighting the beads of sweat forming at her temple. The murmurs around the room quieted into an expectant hush as she carefully lifted the violin, her hands trembling slightly. She was holding history, an instrument crafted for greatness, meant for concert halls and virtuosos, not the hands of a 19-year-old waitress from the other side of town. Robert's smirk deepened as he swirled his scotch lazily in his glass. "Go on, then," he drawled, his voice laced with mockery. "Show us what you've got." Serena swallowed hard and sat down, her spine straightening with an unconscious elegance. She positioned the violin beneath her chin, her fingers instinctively finding their place. The weight of the bow felt foreign yet familiar in her grip. Her hands were shaking, but she refused to let it show. Then she closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, causing her abdomen to expand, then slowly exhaled. And so her hand began to draw the bow, with a gentle, hesitant movement. A whisper of sound that barely skimmed the air. A few patrons shifted in their seats, watching intently. She could feel Robert's gaze drilling into her, waiting for her to fail, waiting for her to prove him right. Suddenly she stood up, then her eyes closed. She imagined playing the violin in her small room. Her bow glided more confidently across the strings, coaxing out a melody that shimmered in the dimly lit space. She chose Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major, a piece that had lived in her heart for years, woven into her dreams and struggles. And then she let go. The notes soared, filling every corner of the restaurant with breathtaking intensity. The music was no longer just sound, it was emotion, raw and unfiltered. It was the late nights practicing in her tiny bedroom, the silent tears of frustration, the unwavering determination to be more than what the world expected of her. The once muted conversations had ceased entirely. The clinking of glasses, the scraping of silverware, the laughter, all gone. The only sound was her violin, weaving a story that words never could. The deeper she played, the less she felt like a waitress, and the more she felt like who she truly was, a musician. Meanwhile, Robert had stopped smirking. His fingers rested motionless against his glass, his jaw slightly clenched. The arrogance in his expression had faded, replaced with something unreadable. Around him, his entourage sat in stunned silence, their earlier amusement wiped away. Her fingers danced along the fingerboard, pouring every ounce of herself into each stroke of the bow. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every silent yearning. She let it all flow into the music. It was no longer about proving anything to Robert or anyone else. It was about proving it to herself. The final notes unswelled, lingering in the air like a fading echo of something divine. Then, silence. Serena remained still, her breath shallow, the violin still cradled beneath her chin. For a brief, agonizing moment, she waited. She waited for laughter, for mockery, for anything that would shatter the fragile moment she had created. But then, a single clap, then another, and then the room erupted. Thunderous applause filled the space as patrons rose to their feet, clapping with fervor. Some had tears in their eyes, others whispered in astonishment, struggling to reconcile the quiet waitress with the prodigy who had just played before them. Even the other restaurant staff, her colleagues who had only ever seen glimpses of her talent, stood beaming with pride. But those sounds made Robert motionless with his hands still on the table. His expression was unreadable as he stared at her, the smug amusement from earlier nowhere to be found. Then, slowly, reluctantly, he lifted his hands and clapped, slow, deliberate, but unmistakably defeated. As for Serena, her heart pounding from something other than fear this time. She had done it. She had taken the moment meant to humiliate her and turned it into something unforgettable. She scanned the room, seeing not strangers but witnesses, people who had truly seen her for the first time. And when her gaze found Robert again, the power dynamic had shifted. He no longer looked down on her. If anything, he looked unsettled. Well, Robert finally spoke, his voice louder than necessary, as if trying to reclaim authority over the room. That was unexpected. Then he chuckled, but his laughter lacked the confidence he had had a few minutes ago. "I suppose talent can come from the most unlikely places," he said. But his words rang hollow. His entourage exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to follow his lead or remain silent. Serena met his gaze, her expression calm but unwavering. "Talent is everywhere," she replied smoothly. "It's how you use it that matters." Her words cut through the air sharper than any insult. The entire room seemed to pause, the weight of her statement settling over them. Robert took a slow sip of his scotch, masking the unease creeping into his features. He nodded once, forced a thin smile, and gestured for another drink, as if that would restore his composure. "You proved your point," he muttered, signing the check with quick, clipped strokes. Serena remained composed. "I just wanted to play," she said simply. Robert hesitated, but there was nothing left to say. He closed the checkbook and stood, his entourage scrambling to follow. The arrogance in his step was gone, replaced with something more hesitant. One of the younger men in his group lingered for a moment and turned back. "You were incredible," he said sincerely. Serena allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you." As Robert and his party disappeared into the night, Serena remained standing, violin still in hand. She felt no bitterness, no gloating victory, just peace. And for the first time, she knew. She had won. Serena no longer cared about Robert. Her mind was set on the future, on the possibilities that lay ahead. The heavy burden she had carried for so long, the doubt, the fear, the self-imposed limitations, seemed to fade into the background. That night, as she counted her earnings, she realized something astonishing. The tips were more generous than usual, far more than she had ever received in a single evening. It was enough to cover her rent and still set aside a portion for violin lessons. The realization sent a rush of warmth through her. She wasn't just surviving, she was moving forward. On her way home, she felt a certainty she hadn't known in years. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a dreamer. She was an artist. Nothing, not mockery, not financial hardship, not fear, could take music away from her. Sitting down at the small wooden desk in her cramped apartment, she let her fingers glide over the strings of her own well-worn violin. The sound was not as rich as the Stradivarius, but it was hers, and that was enough. She played softly, allowing the melody to speak to her soul. The events of the night had been more than just a moment of triumph. They had reshaped how she saw herself. Word of her performance began to spread. It became a story within the community, something whispered with admiration and curiosity. A few days later, Serena's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, Serena Jones." The voice on the other end was smooth and measured. "My name is Richard Ellsworth. I was at Bourbon Steak the other night. I run a small recording studio," he continued. "I won't make grand promises, but I'd like to offer you a chance to record a demo. No pressure, just an opportunity." Serena's breath caught in her throat. A demo. It wasn't fame, it wasn't fortune, but it was a door opening before her. And this time, she wouldn't hesitate to step through. "I'd love that," she said, her voice steady with conviction. She no longer allowed fear to dictate her choices. She understood now that perseverance and authenticity were her greatest strengths. The night with Robert Gonzalez had been more than just an insult-turned victory. It had been a testament to the power of integrity. Robert represented every doubt she had ever faced, every voice that had told her she wasn't enough. But she had answered them with nothing but talent and passion, and that was enough. She also realized that the world would always have people like Robert, those who used their insecurities to make others feel small. But true power didn't come from mockery or status. It came from remaining true to oneself. As she carefully placed her violin back in its case, a small smile formed on her lips. Her journey was just beginning. For the first time, she truly believed that her dream was not just a fantasy. It was within reach. And she remembered the messages her father told her when she was little. Never let anyone else define your worth. And to those who had ever doubted themselves, she had one final thought. Don't wait for someone like Robert to challenge you. Step forward, pursue your dream now, because you might just be the next one to change everything. And finally, her phone screen showed an email with the subject, acceptance notification with the address from Juilliard University. "Hello everyone who has been following my videos. I'm Matthew from New York, and I want to sincerely apologize to all of you. I know that my narration in this video may have been difficult to understand and inconsistent. Unfortunately, part of that is due to my health not being in the best condition. I truly understand that you expect higher quality storytelling, and I promise to improve every day so that my future videos will be better than the one you just watched. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to me, and I welcome any suggestions to help me grow. And I would love to receive a little encouragement and a like from you guys. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you for your patience and support."